Welcome to another episode of the Business of Aesthetics podcast. I'm Michael Walker, your host for today's conversation. And as always, a big thank you to all our listeners tuning in from across the country, across Canada, and around the world. We appreciate your continued support and your enthusiasm for all things aesthetics. A special thank you also goes out to our sponsor for this episode, Equa Marketing. With nearly 20 years of experience, Equa is a leader in digital marketing services for aesthetic practices. They're offering our listeners a complimentary digital marketing consultation, including a tailor-made 12-month strategy built around your goals. And you can go ahead and visit www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM to book your free session today. Where you pick this podcast up, there should be a hot link there for you to click on as well. But if it's not, that's what you'll need to go to, www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM. I can tell you it is a worthwhile investment. There's no tricks or hooks to that. It's just a great opportunity to get some in-depth understanding of your digital footprint and how it's working for you, or perhaps not as well as you'd like. But let's get into today's episode. And it's clinical precision and practice growth inside the multi-location strategy with Mary Ford. Mary, it is great to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Mary, let me give you a little background with Mary. She's an entrepreneur and the founder of Smiley Aesthetics. Mary has built one of the fastest growing medical aesthetics brands in the country, combining top-tier clinical care with smart, scalable business systems. I love that term. That's a great term.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, from launching successful treatments across multiple locations to creating a training and mentorship pipeline for injectors, Mary brings a wealth of practical insights. In this episode, we'll explore what clinical modalities deliver the strongest ROI, how to vet new procedures, train providers across multiple sites, and the protocols that protect both patients and practices. Well, Mary, as I said, it's a pleasure to have you here, and to kick things off, I'm going to hit you right away with a question, and that is, what clinical treatment or modality has delivered the strongest ROI across your practices, and what makes it so effective?
Yeah, so it's a funny, as I think, we're divided into two clinical providers, if you will, right? One that use devices and one that use injectables across the med spa space. And so I think depending on who you ask, which I guess I am both, but which one you ask, might give a different answer. So I think the treatment that provides the most ROI would most likely be an RF microneedling treatment. That it pains me to say, because my specialty is in injecting. And what's something that I love and I'm super passionate about and trained for is the injecting. But if I had to look at numbers and truly picked one, it would be radiofrequency microneedling, because the consumable for pretty much across the board is very low, and then what we're able to charge for it is pretty high. And then always bringing it back to clinical, the results from even just one treatment, which to me is the most important, is results and how well it does for the client, are exceptional. And so all of those together make for the perfect, kind of the perfect thing, and something that we at Smiley are always encouraging people, in terms of device and stuff. It's just such a great treatment, and really does have a great ROI.
Thanks, Mary, for the very to the fact response, but I'm going to go off script because I can. I'm allowed to. So
that's good.
I want to hear just a little bit. That kind of just sets the tone of what, you've introduced Smiley, you've introduced what that looks like. You started, we're talking about some specifics around treatments, but just kind of what was your passion? What was the passion behind starting Smiley? What drove you to, and being an entrepreneur is not for the faint at heart. I'm in that club too, and it's challenging at the best of times. What was your passion that drove you to launch Smiley?
Well, I'm probably going to have a little bit of a unique answer to that question. Is it wasn't so much a passion for aesthetics in general. I mean, obviously, being in healthcare with my originally, I went to school for anesthesia, and I'm a CRNA, and it came after all of that, which would then beg the question, why? Which is what most, I think, CRNAs get, is why would you do something else if you're already doing anesthesia, which is which is both lucrative and very rewarding. And time wise is a really great career. But my journey kind of started with why I got interested into aesthetics, which actually had to do with a recovery story and needing to be out of the OR temporarily, for what was best for me personally, and part of some of the requirements behind that. And so enter in doing something else. And you don't have that many options, really, when you're trying to find something that has, really it's surrounding controlled substances and stuff, and you're trying to move away from that for some meaningful amount of time. And there are a lot of medical providers who have to experience this, but it's just not talked about very often, which I'm definitely trying to flip the script. So aesthetics, inner aesthetics, where we don't use, yes, Botox might be a controlled substance, but not the type of controlled substance I'm talking about. And that's how I got into the world. And that was, almost 7 years ago. Started in traditional med spa, just working as an injector, and then have always kind of had this entrepreneurial, I guess, brain. My twin sister, who's my business partner, and she's clinically a nurse, so she has all sorts of her MBA and her doctor and all this other stuff as well. We've always just done little things together that, just little businesses, side business, side hustles. And this was, so when I decided to go into this and was like, I can do this myself. Of course I dragged her along with me. She said no at first, I like to say. And then we kind of got going. So Smiley was born out of, both a need, and then it very quickly, saw all sorts of needs: training, lack of compliance, lack of just everything. And not gonna, I'm too type A to do something halfway. So, that's kind of what started it. Didn't know it would, it evolved quickly, into what it is now. But yeah, so that's kind of, and then I like making people happy. All the normal answers. I enjoy this. I enjoy people coming in their self-care and making them feel better about the way they look. And, of course, I love all of that. I really do, which is why I still practice in the clinics. But that was really the real reason behind Smiley. So a little bit different answer, maybe.
That's a great answer, and it doesn't surprise
Yeah.
me, being someone who's energized by people,
Yeah.
that it comes across quite clearly. And I think so. You went from here's the translation. I heard it went from a side hustle to a smiley hustle.
That is true. The mobile Botox. It really did
Yeah.
start out as a side hustle. Yeah, and I know some people in the industry get a little up in arms about it. It was not, a side hustle in the right way. A side hustle in a, in the right way, not just I don't really care that much about it, which is how it landed into Smiley, because don't just can't half do anything. So
No.
start do one training and I'm already interested in what's the next, what's the next, what's the next, like what else can I learn? And so then yes, it involved that way clinically for me, and then on the business side a lot for Carla.
Yeah. Well, and that's
So
so cool too with Carla, and that you guys were doing it together and having that partnership. And the in my world, I have a coaching company. Our full focus is on influential leadership coaching, and we define an influential leader as a leader who gives somebody something they didn't even know they need or want. But once they have
love
it, they
that.
can't imagine living without it, and then they
Hmm.
can't wait to give it away. And that's what you just described yourself
Yeah,
as to a
that
T.
yeah, that is a very accurate way to put it. Yes. And
Yeah.
still holds true even to, it's only been 3 years, but in those 3 years, that statement couldn't be more true now. So yes.
Well, looks as I always say, look in the mirror and say, I'm doing good, because you are. And I had to look at the website, and very impressive. Love what you've done up there. But hey, I better get into some questions that we're responding to
Yeah.
today. But I can't, I had to know a little more about you, but thank you for sharing that, Mary.
Yeah.
When evaluating new procedures, what criteria do you and your team use to ensure both safety and efficacy before implementation?
Yeah, that's a great question. The efficacy thing, I mean, they go hand in hand for sure. I think the very first thing I look at is, does it work? So, efficacy and what risk to the patient. So I can't get away from either without the other. What risk to the patient does it have in order to get the result that I want or that it says it is? We are very cautious. There's a lot of noise about, this is the latest and greatest, this is the latest and best, this is safer, this is, and so as a provider or a med spa owner or the person making the decisions for what's coming in clinically, being able to, sift through the noise. It goes back to our are days of learning how to research, which is why I'm well, on a little tangent, but why I'm very big on medical providers being the one providing medical treatments and it's not just medicine, because we learned how to sift through noise like that and how to read research papers and identify a paper that's just from a third, that's not from a third party, it's from a, just paid for and stuff like that. All that is super important and all goes into choosing something. Shouldn't just be a before and after picture, or a really good sales rep. Those are really nice things to have. But there should be some science behind it. There should be a why behind it. There should be a why behind everything we do in medicine because we're affecting people's bodies and faces. And so it's one step deeper than just the rep coming in and the before and afters. It is, and they say, here's all the resources. How many people click on those resources and read each one and make sure they're not just studies done by the company who produces whatever, you're looking to bring in. So just just taking it a step further, going back to how we would research a new medication or research, a new treatment we did in the hospital, or wherever we started, assuming most providers typically have done some sort of clinical practice before aesthetics, and going back to our basics and not leaving that behind because that's how we were trained.
Thank you. And it's interesting you're talking about the why, and I hear a lot of. We had a conversation it was just I think last week at a webinar just talking about how much equipment gets purchased and then never gets used because a
No.
really good sales rep came in
Yeah.
who just built a relationship with you that you couldn't say no to it. And that
Yeah.
goes to your point of why. And I
Hmm.
like to, like people say, what do you mean by why? And so to me, the why looks like this. I ask somebody the why, I say, here's the first question. What do you want your story to be in terms of whatever we're talking about in 10 years from now?
Hmm.
And how are we going to reverse engineer that today and apply the due diligence necessary to acid test that in real cost today, ongoing maintenance costs tomorrow, and upgrade and replacement costs in the future? And it really
Hmm.
becomes, and without doing that, without really looking at that, but we just, well, I need it because I think we do this. We're going to do oh yeah, we're going to do all this. And and if it's not part of your why or your vision of who you are and why you matter, then what's the likelihood of it getting adopted into the culture?
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. And that the last piece you just said is everything. What's the odds of it getting adopted in your culture? What's the odds of you following through? What's the odds of you, actually utilizing the machine? What's the odds of you of actually learning more about the treatment and becoming more advanced or keeping up to date with slim to none? If the only reason you bought it was because the sales rep pitched you a good sale and you never went a step further, then that stuff is, in my opinion, the reason those machines, that stuff is the reason that so many, unfortunately, I think we're up to 67% of med spas, failing or because within the first year because it's not knowing who you truly are as a medical provider and what from the clinical side, but the why, to your point, belongs behind the business as well, the compliance and the clinical. If there's not all three of those whys are not known, then yeah, it's going to sit on the shelf and collect dust or sit in a room and collect dust and be a debt that ends up, you know, sinking you potentially, or worse,
Mhm.
hurting somebody or some things that are, that could be a whole lot worse. So
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I think that's, the whole idea of, I would imagine you might be familiar with it, but the book by Simon Sinek
mhm.
it's on the why, start with the why, I think it's called. Um,
Yeah, huh.
if anyone's listening to this and they're trying to say, okay, well, I have never really thought about that because every organization has three spaces, the transactional space, which is what you do and how you do it. And
Mhm.
that's not the why. That's what you do and how you
No.
do it. There's a relational space about who you are and why you matter. That's the why. And then
Mhm.
when those two are working well together, there's the creative space, and that is the bridge between what you do and who you are. And when
Mhm.
those aren't working well together, that's when I get hired as a mediator and deal with the conflict that arises. But the reality is to take that time to really think. And so I just encourage that. I don't get any royalties or anything from that book, but I think it's a great book. It paints it paints a really good picture. One of them being the idea of Dell computers. They sell computers. Do you want to buy one?
Mhm.
That's what they do. They sell on all the peripherals that go with that. Where Apple came along and said, we're going to create a culture and a community that's going to be revolution the way we do life, how we connect with each other, how we interact. And oh, by the way, we're going to sell iPads and iPhones and all that. So their why came before the what. And I think
Mhm.
that's really what you're saying, Mary. And I think that it's not necessarily and a great nothing wrong with a great sales rep, but a great question to ask them is, if this was your piece of equipment you're bringing it to, how would you help? How would you answer the why to the reason
Hmm.
we're looking at this? Make them do some work.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Make them do a
challenge
step
them.
beyond. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
A step beyond, well, all you need is two clients for this to be, to make the payment, that wonderful line. And it's just like, okay, well, are you going to give me those two clients every month for the
Yeah.
next 5 years just to be safe? Because if we can do that, then, okay, then I'll figure out my why a little after. But no, that's not realistic. And I really loved what you said earlier. It's the difference in utilizing the machine and becoming great at it, which is where business and clinical, as always, clinical being the forefront of all of this stuff, because patient safety and stuff goes up in that. And that you're gonna stay up with the times, stay safe with it, but you're not gonna do all that. You're gonna look at it one day, you some random client 6 months after you brought it in, gets on your schedule, and okay, I'm gonna go, IPL their face and I haven't used it. I mean, that stuff, like, that's how that translates clinically. And so yeah, so yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, man. It's great. Well, and obviously to be a successful entrepreneur like you are, you have to be really good at managing your cash drivers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be
Hmm.
sitting here talking to me. And the
Hmm.
reality is this is a neighborhood where we go and buy stuff that it uses cash, just like, well, you shouldn't have any, but accounts receivable, but the inventory, they're big
Hmm.
factors in our cash drivers. And we just buy, well, we'll just get that because it's a great deal or whatever. And and you would, I know we won't go digging into the entrepreneurial side because that's really not the focus here today. But I know that you would say to me, I said, we had to be very intentional with our cash management, and we established priorities and where we're going to invest in. And there's some things we wanted to do, we had to wait and had to do
Hmm.
that part two or part three.
Hmm.
That's what
For sure.
and that's what an entrepreneur does. And that's what
Hmm.
and just because there's money in the bank too doesn't mean that's actually money available. That's another
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So
Oh my
uh,
gosh. Yeah.
so
Uh-huh.
let's go to another. So can you walk us through a few clinical protocols you've standardized to ensure consistent outcomes, regardless of the provider or the location?
Yeah, so this one's twofold for me, because on one end, I my mind jumps to standard packages, standard like ways of doing things and stuff, when everything we do clinically, and I'm super passionate about it because it is what is compliant. So everything we do clinically is so unique to each individual. So we're very careful with like a package or this. We do sell things in packages of three, but then the conversation surrounding it is extremely important, because three is not right for everybody. And that's one example. Or I'm trying to think, or if you have a neck rejuvenation package, everything in that package are all, assuming they're all medical treatments, which for the most part in med spas they are, not all of those are going to be applicable to everybody. We can't just sell those types of packages to people. So back to protocols and stuff, it's kind of similar to that. Like a protocol is more surrounding like what you do if something goes wrong, or slash ours, that's how ours are, or maybe it's just guidelines to avoid, I guess, worst case scenarios. I'm trying to figure out how to articulate what I'm saying. Our protocols are very we recognize that each individual is an individual, and so the protocol like fits around that, if that makes sense. So it's standard, but it's still individualized. Trying to figure out how I say that. It's just very, I want to make sure that our providers, especially our advanced practice providers, which are the only ones who can make treatment plans, right? Super compliant over here. Love our registered nurses and stuff, but they're not able to make their treatment plans. And so our protocols are very advanced practice focused. And then our registered nurses are still looking to our advanced practice providers, to actually guide them on their treatment plan, because they can't make their own treatment plans in any state. There's no state that you're allowed to do that. And so I hate the word standard, I think is about what I'm saying. I hate the word standard. It's more of just there are protocols and guidelines for sure on how we use things and how we're trained. And we get those from our trainings, and we expand upon them based on our clinical experience and stuff, especially after we've been using them for years. But I struggle with the word standard when it surrounds anything clinical because of the individual client aspect. So I'm struggling with that question more than I thought I would, but I hope some of that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this as you're answering that. We're talking about protocols. So because I had there's an interesting conversation came up the other day. So you think about a protocol. Traditionally, protocols are all transactional. They're all structural. Here's
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing how, and that's what you're saying. That's the standardized nature of them, right?
Yes.
And so, but there's a other side of it, and that's the relational side. And the example would be, somebody comes into you and they want to have some treatment that you're looking at them. Are you thinking what they want is really not what's best for them?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
might be something that you're going too far, or that's not what you're not going to get given some of these other variables that might we not get the outcome that you're hoping or expecting or your
Mm-hmm.
expectations. And so that would be a protocol to your point, which would be very relational. And
Yeah.
so it's so it we don't just say no because we say no or say yes,
Mm-hmm.
but we actually engage the relation. There's a saying that comes with this that I think would be very appropriate would be people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And so
Yes.
what I hear is you trying and saying is that we do both. We
Yes.
know what we're doing and we have protocols that keep it safe and make sure that we're cutting edge when it comes to safety and the protocols and all the regulatory aspects
Mm-hmm.
of the business. But then we're also know you well enough that we're okay saying, you know what, Mary, I don't think this is the right treatment for you.
Exactly. And so, yeah,
That makes sense.
it does make sense. And it's also we have these, it's like policy protocols. We have this standard of care that's our protocols meet the standard of care. That how's that? They meet the standard of care with a, but it has to allow for if I'm doing a radio frequency microneedling treatment, for example, to bring it back to that, and the patient's tissue doesn't respond the way that, this protocol might think it is. There's something unique. It's something we've never seen before. I mean, this is a new industry. Like this relative to medicine, this is brand new. So something is going on that is not doesn't fall within some sort of standard. I need my providers to be able to think through and deviate away from that and use their critical thinking and use what they went to school for to be medical providers, which is the difference in a medical provider, non-medical provider, critical thinking to be able to adjust and treat them accordingly. And that won't fall in any type of standard protocol. It's kind of what I'm getting at. It's this ability to prescribe the treatment because these radiofrequency, for example, are injectable. It's the practice of medicine in every state. So, or the delegation of the practice of medicine in every state. So, you're prescribing these things, and in order to do that, you have to be able to adjust. So, a lot of discussion. For I think the point got across. I like the way you put it, and it's just keeping it standard to make sure it's safe for sure to meet a standard of care, but ensuring providers are trained well enough in order to deviate away from it when necessary. Yeah,
It's,
we're gonna go
that
with that.
makes it. No, that's good. I was thinking about this. You caught me on critical thinking because I love that term, but it's a term that is critical thinking to me. The corollary of critical thinking is unconditional curiosity.
Hmm. Hmm.
Curiosity without opinion, expectation, and judgment, starting with yourself. So that's what would
Hmm.
be helpful when you're looking at buying a piece of equipment too. But the
Yeah,
idea
right.
here is saying, the critical thinking is, you don't have bias to this. You're able to look at the process, the person, the question, ask the questions. And in my business, I spend most of my time not with the issue, that where the friction is. I speak to the
Hmm.
underlying interests, which are their needs, desires, concerns, and fears. You
Hmm.
guys do the
Hmm.
same thing. And
Yep.
so critical thinking has to engage that, not just the science
Yeah.
or the
And
regulatory structure.
I just feel like in medical aesthetics, it just started away from that. And that's maybe because of it being a newer industry and stuff, but we haven't quite got back to it. But we follow and do. And now you have to deal with we do based off what we see on social media. I mean, it's like this, it's even worse than just, new medicine back in the 1940s. I mean, like you're seeing at least in practice and following what is done where practice versus someone on social media that you can't even tell what's AI generated or not to the point of our conversation earlier. So, it's just we dropped critical thinking. I see it dropped all the time when I train people when decisions on bringing machines are made, we're not critically thinking through that is a treatment that I'm going to prescribe to my patients. So then why? All the things we've talked about. So if I think about it like that, I'm not just bringing it in because it's a great deal or because the sales rep said that it was going to, I was going to bring in 100 patients a month off this, by month two. I mean, like, but we do that, but I see it all the time in the in the medical aesthetic space and with med spas and stuff. And so yeah, it's the difference in that using your critical thinking will avoid that purchase, or maybe it is the right purchase. Maybe it is absolutely the right purchase. Because you have seen 25 of your last patients that need an IPL, need an RF microneedling treatment. That's what you need. They need it. You would have prescribed it. You would have suggested it. You would have recommended it. It's not a suggestion. You would have given that medical advice. Then hell yeah, go buy your device and then start shopping. Start using a business and shopping. But the critical thinking piece and the treatment planning and the why has got to come first. It'll save a lot of money too. Save so much money.
Yeah, and that's, and that becomes, when you don't have, I think one of the things I've seen a lot in the medical, I spend time in the in the aesthetics field, in the dental field, in plastic surgery field, the veterinary field, and across the board, the consistent piece that I see is the majority of the leaders are accidental entrepreneurs. They're not
Yeah,
you.
gosh.
You have a passion
Uh,
for it. And so when you have a passion for that, you have what you say when you have a passion for entrepreneurship is you're comfortable going up in the balloon and looking at things at 330,000 feet and then being able to execute to bring it back down. And it's the idea, and that's vision. And vision is not necessarily, it's not a given. Everyone's not really comfortable. People that are energized by stuff don't really, they're good with their vision of the stuff,
mhm,
not the people. And so it's
mhm,
just, I think that's important. That remember that if this is, if it's, what is your art? I always take my clients and say, we're going to take 80% of your time and focus on the 20% of what you're great at. Is it injecting?
mhm,
You're going to be you're going to be Olympic level,
mhm.
that sort of
Yep.
attitude. And I think that's
Mhm,
the thing is make sure you've got the right fit. And if you don't have, but we also don't have to play every instrument in the orchestra. We just need to understand the process, and we hire great players. And I think
mhm.
that's the other thing is finding that balance, finding what, bringing in specialists that can support you, that can help you take it. It's kind of like, it's an unhealthy example, but
Mhm.
I'll use it, being an ex-football player. Um, Not saying
Mhm.
I ever used steroids. However, it's hard to get to the next level. There's a tipping
Mhm.
point, and it pushes you to that next level. If you stay on it, it becomes a problem. It's a help. But sometimes you need. That's not a great choice. I know that saying that, but I think sometimes you need a person, somebody like a Mary,
Mhm.
for it to come along, somebody to help encourage you. I don't know what areas you get into in that coaching side of it, Mary, but you would be a great coach and a great support. I'm sure you have um, enough on your plate, but I'll just throw it out there. But
Well, I appreciate that.
so let me throw you another question out. This is on team training, and I like this is, and I'm gonna ask you, how do you approach team training to maintain clinical competency? So that's that transactional space we're talking about,
Mhm.
sure, right?
Mhm.
And patient trust, that's the relational space we're talking
Mhm.
about across multiple practices. Now you've got multiple sites and practice, you've got a lot of things going on, right? So
Mhm.
and that's the biggest challenge. And if there's anyone here that has a multiple site, the greatest challenge is consistency across the different groups.
Mhm. For
And
sure.
I know that you've got some experience with that. So how do you approach that training in both the clinical competency and the patient trust when you're looking at multiple practices?
Yeah, so I think to back up a little bit, or before I get straight to the training, it starts with we start ours. What is consistent throughout our med spas, all of them, is the experience. So the experience that they go in, that the our reviews and stuff reflect kind of the same thing: a warm, kind of inviting environment that's not so doctor officey feel. What it is doesn't really matter. It's just because it doesn't matter if it goes the opposite direction. It's clean and however, but that is what we kind of focused on first, is that every Smiley location that we opened, the experience was very similar, and that helped with the rapport. And so once that patient rapport is at least started and goes in a positive direction, then the outcome is, if a provider is not as sharp at one med spa as another, which our providers are amazing, but still, it's going to come to when we bring in. We're not opposed to newer injectors anywhere. That's kind of the mission of Smiley, in fact. And we have some great experience in our med spas, but still, if a new injector were to come in, there, of course, it stands to reason that her injection may not be the exact same as somebody else's. But if you start with that experience and establish that rapport, and some of that stuff is done first, then the outcome matters a little bit less, or there's a little more wiggle room, I think, and of course, there's always extremes. I'm talking about, like, you need to touch up a provider touches up her Botox or enhances their Botox, as I like to say, pretty much every patient, because she's still learning faces and, how to get it where maybe that doesn't have to happen. That doesn't become such a big deal to clients and stuff when that first part is done. So, I think that's really important to speak to first. And then training wise, it's just establishing a level of expectation that I don't budge on. Training is my absolute, that's probably number one thing passion wise, which, speaks to the coaching. Just that whole thing is, I definitely have a level of expectation for amount of training that should be done, quality of training that should be done. And I've never really, I've never given on it. I've never caved on it. When it comes to online resources, when it comes to what you're doing in your downtime, if it comes to, it should pretty much, as a clinician, if that is your main focus, if you are you know, if you're an injector in one of our med spas, if you are not treating clients, then you're reviewing on what you should be doing to treating clients. There's just not a lot. Of course, there's some marketing and some patient follow-up and those kind of things that you could be helping with, but the majority of your time is focused on making yourself a better clinician. And so budgeting for that as a business owner, or if you're a clinic manager, or whoever manages your money, for those providers to continue to be trained and to continue to, find opportunities to learn new things and never rest on, the one training they had, or, is just, it's imperative. And then, what training and who you're being trained by. Can you tell them now? I'm on my TED talk. I mean, it's just like not all training is created equal, and not all trainers are created equal. In this day and age, everyone's a trainer on social media. They've been rejecting for all of 5 seconds. And I privately train, and I privately train. And oh my gosh, if they get an Instagram following, then they're definitely a trainer. And it's just, we once again, we lose our minds as medical providers and everything that we know, and we don't research anybody. We just oh, I believe her because she looks great on Instagram. I mean, and I'm not going to see if that person's even a nurse or even a real, I don't know. I'm not going to check any of their credentials. And I'm just going to go train with them because they have a bunch of followers, and maybe I can do an Instagram collab with them and gain some followers. I mean, it's mind boggling. And so back to your original question, before I'll let you speak in, I standardizing the level of training that is received or sought out, or what I say, this is what I want you to do, or whatever. It is high. It is, the expectation is high. And then QCing it, like making sure it's done, ensuring it's done, not just saying, hey, I want you to go do this webinar. It's following up. They usually give you something at proof that it was done. I mean, I am a stickler for stuff like that. But it shows, because our providers do provide exceptional levels of care. They're not all perfectly equal, but they're daggum close. And if they're not, we allocate more time and attention to that particular provider until we can, get them to a comfort level that's more acceptable. That's a long answer, but
It's a
you
good thing
tapped
you're not,
in.
it's a good thing you're not passionate about that.
You tapped into my passion, if you will.
That's
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So
Yeah.
first question I ask a coaching client, I coach coaches nowadays, but coaches is first question is, what are you passionate about? And what are the values that are non-negotiable that underpin that? And often we haven't really thought that through. And then we just are, particularly in this world with Instagram, everything social media, people are chasing dreams that don't reflect their identity, and they find themselves at a dead end and wonder what happened.
Yeah.
And that's
Yes.
another conversation. We won't go
I
down that rabbit
know.
trail. But
Oh my gosh, I know.
so
I'm literally
here's
like,
a,
whoop.
yeah, I know. And so I like to tie training to vision and values.
Hmm.
So when I think about vision, that's who you are and why you matter. That's that relational piece, who you are. So if in this conversation, my vision might be my vision is that we will be known worldwide as the the people that unexpectedly delight customers in ways they've never
Hmm.
experienced before. That'd be a vision. Then
Love that.
the values are whatever integrity, whatever we're going to do, integrity, truth, honesty, excellence, profession, whatever values we're going to that are just there's no wiggle room. Those hold that. That's holding that vessel. And then the mission is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And then that's goals and objectives, that's KPIs, and then I also try and include celebrating the wins into that. So, but the wins are both
Hmm.
transactional and relational, both about
Hmm.
who we are, why we matter, and what we do and how we do it. A lot of companies lose the other piece, the relational piece, because they focus on the KPIs because they're driven by the bottom line and the measurements that are expected by the bank, et cetera.
Hmm.
But so to me, I think it's that idea because you talk about experience. So anything, the advantage of having that kind of a structure is you can test any training module
Hmm.
against it. So
Yep.
if it doesn't run through, if you know they're well, we do train like that, but sometimes we do it this way or something. Did you want
Hmm.
something different? Well, if we've got integrity as a core value, that might not line up.
Yeah, and that's important what you just said because that's exactly what we did. We have had some newer injector. Like I said, she's not, a couple of them are not necessarily newer anymore, but when they came on, they were, which was uncomfortable a little bit for me, but not really because I was A, confident in what we were already wanting people to do on the training front, and then B, enforcing it and had no problem with it not being an option. And then, knowing and C, having it's not a backup plan, but just having this if she's not where I need her to be or where I want her to be in this amount of time, I'm able to continue. I'm not just gonna be like, well, she's good enough. We're just gonna fly out, fly there. And I'll say this for people listening, that a lot of people, it's kind of there's varying opinions. These mentorships and these year-long internships and some of the stuff that people are doing. Sure, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that someone watching somebody for a year is not it couldn't be valuable or it's not a bad thing. But do I think it's necessary, or do I think it's like it has to be done this way? Like, no, I absolutely don't. I think that to some extent, when you look at some of these programs, they're really money grabs, and they're nothing more than that. And shadowing somebody 57 times over the year for $10,000 a month is just ridiculous. And yay for those who have the funds to do that, but I don't think that that's necessary. But for the reasons that I stated before, whatever you're doing as that business owner, and then if you're an injector listening, it's what kind of injector do you want to be? And if you there is a level of safety where standard and safety do meet, and you can just ride that wave and be safe and be standard. And you can probably, go to maybe a training every couple of years, whatever, and you can kind of ride that wave. That's there. Or do you want to excel at your craft and be known as an artist in the injecting world, which is very different than just someone who's riding the wave. So it comes from both sides. It's investing from the owner and stuff, and budgeting that in from day one, continuing education, just like we do in the hospital. I hate to bring it back, but it's a field of medicine. And in the hospital, we continue education every year, no matter what. It's budgeted in. And then for med spas, it's like, oh, can't afford to train this year. Probably not next year, but I'll try again. It's like, what? How did that become the standard that the medical aesthetics industry is? It's mind-boggling to me. So if anything, look back on that, take it back to that conversation of what do you do? What did you do to take care of patients before you did medical aesthetics? And are you doing that now? And I think most people will find, no, I'm not. And I can very easily see how that makes sense. And I need to do something like that. So,
Yeah, that's a great answer, Mary. I think bringing it back, it's kind of back to it is a medical field. Like this is a medical.
yes.
Yeah, when I first started doing webinars or podcasts with in this area, I'm
Hmm.
thinking these people stick needles in people's faces. That's like super high risk. I don't know. I
Yeah.
would really want to know. I don't, you might be the greatest, have the highest marks or whatever. That's important to me. I don't want
Hmm.
a neurosurgeon to be one of the top of his class, not my best friend. Both would be
Hmm.
helpful. But the idea though is that I think it's such a chasing whims and chasing concepts and chasing market share will always lead to a place where when you go home at night and somebody says, "How was your day?" You can't really answer the question.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
what would it look
Yeah.
like to your point? You know what you're passionate. When you go home and you've had a great day, you're going to say we had a great day. We did that. So it'll be somewhat transactional about some stuff you did put together, but there'll be
Hmm.
probably stuff that you talk about. I don't know if you have kids or it'll be something about had a great time at the gym or whatever that looks like. But there'll be something that'll be very personal. And I think that's the other thing is that it's finding. So I always say these, people say, well, I just have to manage my time better. I say, well, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
Unless you got more than 24 hours a day, because that's how many I got, then I'd like to know how you got that. But if you didn't, then
Hmm.
it's not about time management, it's about time prioritization. And so how are you prioritizing yourself in this model? And because you mentioned the failure rate, and the failure rate is a blend of some of the stuff we're talking about. It's also burnout. And it's
Oh
also,
yeah, for sure.
and there's a reason that you've kept yourself healthy, you've kept yourself vibrant in how you approach this, and it wasn't by accident.
Yeah, and I love what you just said. And I mean, I might have to steal that a little bit, the time prioritization versus time management, because I think the number one question, we're a little off tangent, but not really. The number one question is okay, how do you have time for all of it? I get asked that all the time. And I love that answer instead, because I don't necessarily say time management. I say I'm efficient with my time is usually what I say. Because while I don't have to plan, every minute of my day is not planned, and I have a 3 and a 5-year-old. I'm getting my MBA. I have this company. I still stay fit and find time to do, play sand volleyball. It's just, time efficiency or time prioritization, I think is another thing I want to add to that answer, because that matters. And so how do I find time to train, to get training myself, or how do I find time to continue training? Granted, I'm in a little bit different situation with when I go train, or when I train the trainer, I have opportunities that are a little bit different, but the reason still stands. I don't have to go to train the trainer. I don't have to. That's 2 days that I need to build into my, sometimes twice a year, whatever it is for that company and that company. It is about prioritizing your time. And I have the same 24 hours as everybody else. And so something is different. It's not about that. And it's not about managing those 24 hours. There's something more to it. And it does flow right into training and stuff. And it is prioritization. That's both for the injector and for the person who's maybe the same, the business owner, the money manager, whoever that is.
Yes, and you pull that into your pitch when you're sharing that on your train the trainer.
Yeah, yeah, I'm going to. I like it.
All right, let me throw up. Let's hit a question here about some red flags. What are some red flags for me? And I'm a race marshal as well. I marshal Formula One races and stuff. So red flags
Oh,
mean that
that's
red,
cool.
red flags mean that we got a full stop on the course. That's not a good thing. So,
Oh,
what are some of the red
interesting.
flags you teach your staff to always take seriously during treatments, and how do those protocols protect patients and providers alike? And I think it's important that we're talking about patients and providers, but I think we're also talking about the team.
Yeah. So, because it'll trickle down, or it'll trickle up, down, whatever. It'll trickle out of that room if you're not being aware of the red flags. And the red flags, it's all clinical kind of. It's the patient in general. Like so my mind goes two places. It goes to what clinical red flags are, am I looking for during a treatment, which that's a whole, that's treatment based, and that's just clinical training. And then it's red flags, that's just like patient specific, or like them as a person. And that can start on the phone with the daggum front desk person, when they're just giving you hell just to schedule the appointment, or you get in the room, and there's certain trigger things that are said, or we should always be aware of body dysmorphia. It's something that's not talked about enough. We're trying to talk about it more. That's a huge red flag when you're before you ever treat the patient, or sometimes it's after the first treatment. I mean, there's business flags, like money stuff that they say, or they already hint at about, affordability of a treatment and stuff before you ever even touch them. And I mean, there's a lot of red flags. And so I think just talking, we have entirely too many, monthly or weekly meetings. I'm mostly kidding, but that kind of that speak to some of this. I mean, whether it's the entire clinical team across Smiley, every provider that provides any type of clinical esthetician or medicine, we have one for that, to talk about things that have happened, both clinical things to look for, as well as how we as providers speak to patients and stuff to avoid some of that stuff. Even Michael, when it comes to like the patient, you've asked them 3 times to stop touching their face, and they just keep touching, it's so there's so many facets to that question that my mind runs to, that I have a hard time putting it down to something specifically. But I guess my answer to generalize it would be to address them, to talk about them, and to not let it just be like, make sure you watch out for, the body dysmorphia. Someone might be like, okay, I'm gonna watch, and then what does that mean? And so it's training on them. And once again, it's not necessarily standardizing, because they can look. Yes, we can have common signs and symptoms for red flags, but they still look different from each individual. So addressing them, taking the time to have a monthly meeting and review what's gone on, and did we have a conversation that it made it all the way up to me? Like, this patient made it all up to me. That's something we need to talk about. Why did it start here? Why did it go next to the next advanced provider? Why did it go to one of our vice presidents? And why did it make it to me? And what can we do to learn from that and address it? So I guess my answer, like I said, is addressing it and talking about it and training on it, whether it's business, the business thing from the front desk person or all the way down to the clinical signs and symptoms of a VO, because those are red flags too. So my mind went all over the place on that one.
I was good. No, I follow. If I followed you, then we're probably doing okay. So,
All over the
it's
place.
interesting. I say, in I always make a joke that in life we're told there's two things that are inevitable and unavoidable. And that was death and taxes, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
somebody lied to us. That's a big old fat lie because there's actually four things. There are four things that are inevitable and unavoidable: death, taxes, change, and conflict.
Hmm.
It's just the last two don't have to be deadly and costly. And what's interesting is that most of us want to avoid conflict or have that difficult conversation or speak to an issue that we don't think that we're not sure how it's being received or handled. And so we apply the sleeping dog theory, that I'll
Hmm.
just let them sleep, though it'll go, or time heals all wounds, which are both again lies from the pit of hell. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, it's about being able to step up and ask a question. And I find one of the things that I find is when there's the reason things don't get talked through is because of the fear of conflict. Usually, that's one of the
Hmm.
big issues. It's this idea of saying, help me understand. That's how I start so many conversations. Help me understand how we're doing this, or how it's that unconditional
Hmm.
curiosity I was talking about earlier, right? And
Hmm.
the other side of that is also just the idea that what do you think's happening?
Hmm.
We are
Yep.
sometimes asked that because we don't want it. We think whatever they say we have to deal with. No, we can just receive it. We can like
Hmm.
move that energy wherever we want. We don't have to own it.
Sure.
So
Hmm.
but and I think as leaders, I think that's really important. What you're saying, Marion, how you've developed that confidence in yourself to present that, but you clearly make it available to others in the way they can say, oh, I could do that. I can see that.
Hmm.
And I think
Oh,
that's go
go
ahead.
ahead. I try. I mean, what you're saying is you. The number one thing that I think I say when I'm training or coaching or talking to anybody is the way that you deliver something is everything. And the confidence with which you deliver it in the medical aesthetic space as a provider in the room is everything. It is everything to recommend, not upsell, to recommend that next syringe, to recommend that next treatment, it's everything. But you if it's a meek and whatever, and your mind is in their wallet. One of my other areas, get your mind out of their wallet. It's none of your business. That's not what we're doing as medical providers, and you truly can't in the room do that because it's illegal. Cannot base my treatments based on that. But setting expectations, and to your point, leaning into the conflict that might happen, which is you might not like your result, or this could happen. Or so if you set expectations and start it right there, you've already quelled some fears of both your own and that, because we did talk about it. So then if it happens, and then it's a matter of when, not if, a red flag is going to turn into a problem, even if you did everything you could to mitigate it, aside from just pushing it back out the door, like, nope, you're not my client, get out, which we try not to do, obviously. And you did everything right. There's going to be a vascular occlusion. There's going to be a patient who doesn't pay. There's going to be whatever, a bad outcome and or an outcome that requires further intervention in some way, and that fear and all of that keeps you knowing that when, not if, and it's not that, hopefully that doesn't drive you into anxiety. We have a whole other problem, but it's just knowing that that could happen and knowing what to do about it and preparing yourself, protocols, standard protocols, some things to know what to do when something goes wrong can hopefully give the confidence to address it. And I think that all of those things are there. Once it's kind of a lot of words for not very hard things to do. In 2 minutes, you set expectations, deliver with confidence, and kind of address things that could happen, within 2 minutes of a conversation. So, but you do have to have the confidence to do it. And that's something that's hard to give to people. I think you're probably better at that than me.
No, you're pretty darn good at it. But I say with these doctors, I see a pattern. I see the senior professionals that they feel that they have to know everything, they have to be right, and they have to be perfect. And it's not okay to say I don't know, but it is, and that's
Mhm.
part of the journey of leadership. It was that, you know, the Mark Twain said, if you think you're a leader, every once in a while you should look behind and see if anybody's following. I think
Yeah.
that's the challenge in this field because by sheer demand and the structure, the science and the theory and all the need and demand for the services push it forward, but it pushes forward a transactional structure, but you could leave the people behind, or you're constantly replacing people, or people don't feel empowered. And I can just tell, so smiley aesthetics.com is Mary's That's their website. You have to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
It is awesome. It is so well done. Really like what I see.
Thanks.
If
Yeah.
I look forward one day to visit one of your clinics. But our
Yeah.
time is getting to an end, Mary. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Flew
joining us
by.
today and sharing your clinical and your business experience, sharing your passion and
Thank you.
you just on running a successful multi-location aesthetic practice. It's a lot of work with. There's a reason that you're being successful, and it's not one reason, but it's a collection of them. And I just encourage you, if you've been listening to this, just sort of if is to even think about going back over it and identify 4 or 5 things that you've heard that you can hear from Mary that have set her up for success, not just
Hmm.
financial, but relational, physical, emotional, obviously, arguably spiritual, whatever that might look for. But
Hmm.
it's prosperity. It's the wholeness of a person, not just not the financial dimension on its own. So I just leave that
Hmm.
thought with you, and
Love that.
again. Um, I hope that we've left our audience with some great takeaways. Well, I don't have to
Yeah.
hope. I know we have. You've been a rock star, Mary. It's been fun. Just a lot of fun. So, to our amazing audience, thank you for listening. We appreciate your continued support of the Business of Aesthetics podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to share it with your colleagues and tag us on social media. Help us spread knowledge and elevate the industry together. I like to say, if we do that together, we set each other up for success, and that's a good idea, isn't it? So
Yes, it
don't
is.
forget to leave us a review. We love reviews, and so should you. And love reviews, not just reviews that say you did great service, but how you unexpectedly delight them. That's what you're looking for. Now, don't
Love
forget
that.
to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps others discover the show and benefit from these important conversations. And boy, this has been really important, Mary. Thank you. A final thank you to Echo Marketing for sponsoring today's episode. Don't miss your opportunity to receive a free customized digital marketing strategy for your aesthetic practice. As I said before, you can visit www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM to schedule your consultation. As I said, this is a completely free thing. And actually, they do about a 4 or 5 hour a deep dive into your digital footprint. And if you're an expert on digital stuff, then this might not be something that you probably have done that yourself. But if you haven't,
Hmm.
there's no hooks or tricks here. There's no one trying to do anything. I encourage you to jump in and just go and see what you can find there. I always try and look at these kind of things through 2 questions. First question is, what's at risk to do it? Well, your time, which is super valuable. I appreciate that, but there's no
Hmm.
financial implication. The second question is probably more relevant. The second question is, what's at risk if you don't? I'll
Yeah,
leave
right.
that for each person to consider that. So until next time, and on behalf of Mary and her whole team at Smiley, keep innovating, stay focused on patient care, and continue to build a practice that thrives. Again, thank you, Mary, for joining us, and Mike Walker.
Thank you.